Hello, the doctor is in. Hey, Mo.
Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Doctors In. We are so glad you could join us on this Woo-Saw Wednesday. Everybody needs to take a deep breath and
Yeah.
just
Whoo.
woo-saw.
Whoo. Woosah. Woosah. We all need it. We all need it. We
We
all
do.
need it.
Philly the stress is high right now in Philadelphia. I don't know if you guys are following the news, but there is just violence against Black bodies happening all over the place. There
Really?
is civil unrest. There is injustice. There are questions that need answers, and folks are really focused on that. It's a little upsetting because the quarantine and the COVID and the mask wearing and all those things, the voting are all taking a backseat to the civil unrest. So I'm worried and trying to woosah up here in Philly right now.
Is it because of the voting? Is it because of voting issues, Mo, or what is it?
No, a young man was shot and killed. He was wielding a knife, and he was his family really did try as best as they could to intervene and to de-escalate the situation. He was autistic and perhaps some other mental health issues, and the authorities don't seem to follow that. They didn't follow that suit and de-escalate, and he was killed unfortunately while the entire block watched in horror. And so it just speaks again sort of the structural racism and the climate and all of the things that go into understanding what that young man was doing and what the police were thinking and why these systems are set up such that he had to end up that way. And so it's just a lot going on in Philly right now. But
when is it going to stop? When is the madness going to stop? Oh my
you know
gosh.
what? And who knows? But what's not stopping is a coronavirus. And what that means for us is it means that cancer doesn't quarantine either. And I know from a medical perspective, our guest today can really, speak to the fact that we're seeing advanced disease, we're seeing delayed screenings and the consequences of those. And that certainly trickles down into our clinical trial enrollment and how we execute clinical trials. And we want to talk about that today. So Ricky, why don't we, let's just jump right into it because it's going to be a good discussion today.
Yeah, it's really good. So we talk about clinical trials a lot, Mo, but the participation of Black women in breast cancer trials, sometimes you hear 3%, you may hear 5%, but it's really, really low. Some of the newer drugs that have come out, like Trodelvy, it's 7.8%. Tecentriq actually even had almost 20%, but the numbers are really low. And I believe strongly about how I feel about Black breast cancer, and we'll talk about that today, but I believe that we don't have drugs that work on our bodies. And until we all participate in research, we're not going to get the treatments that we need to save our lives. And, again, 42% of Black women are dying of breast cancer, more likely to die of breast cancer than white women. And we've got to change that. We have got to change it. It must change. So today we have with some really good guests. We have one of my lovely breasties, Sheila, who was in a trial, and she's going to talk about her experience. And we've got Dr. James Lillard from Morehouse Medical School, and we've got my Dr. Sarah Horton, my lovely friend. And actually, I was friends with her mom, and I met her by accident. But she's a great doctor and great, has some great experience at the FDA. So I'm going to let them all introduce themselves, and then we get into a discussion. But we have to figure out how to get rid of the fear that we have, get rid of the mistrust in the medical system, and get over all these barriers that are keeping Black women from participating. So let's talk it out. So Dr. James, you're the only man, so you get to go first.
Oh, guys, old guys first. Okay. So I'm James Lillard. I'm a professor and Associate Dean for Research Affairs at Morehouse School of Medicine. I'm the principal investigator of a protocol called Total Cancer Care. We receive funding from the American Association for Cancer Research, Pelotonia Foundation, and M2Gen to help fund this. It's a non-treatment clinical study or clinical trial, but it's allowing us to discover new biomarkers and new drug targets that affect our breast cancer community.
Can you explain a little bit what non-treatment means for people?
Right. So, you won't be, you won't be given any new drug. Instead, we're trying to get a better understanding of the genetics of the person and the mutations or the genetics of the cancer, and how patient responds to therapy. It'll help us define what their risk factors were in the first place. It's really quite simple. You know, at the time of patient engagement or consent, we collect saliva. You know, you spit in a tube, real simple.
I did it.
Oh
I mean
yeah,
it.
you did it.
Yeah.
And then a second step that's in the background is we run to the pathology department and get either the biopsy or the tumor that was excised, and we sequence that as well. So together we have an understanding of the risk factors the patient may have had that made them more susceptible to breast cancer. And second, we get a better understanding of the genetics of the cancer itself. Okay, so that, and now in the era of precision medicine, there are actually drugs now that will only target mutations or adaptations the tumor has developed to be more precise and precision medicine that will kill the tumor and have lesser side effects in patients. So it's really an exciting time to be in this space. And there are a lot of new therapies that are available. You know, our study will provide a medical report. Again, all free of charge. It provides a medical report to the treating physician and patient that would help in the clinical decision support to determine what would be the best therapy for the patient, number one. And it would help identify clinical trials, okay, for a treatment study, in that case, where a new treatment might be matched with that patient that would give the best outcome.
Awesome.
We'll get into that more and
Yeah.
understand
What
what that means exactly. Let's let Dr. Horton introduce herself, and then she'll introduce herself, and then we're going to have this conversation about the challenges of precision medicine and why we give the medicine that we give. You know, what is it that makes us not so precise? What are some of those questions?
Right. Dr. Sarah.
Hey, so thank you first for the invitation to be here. This is such a timely discussion. So thank you, Ricky, and thank you, Dr. Mo. I'm Sarah Horton. I'm a medical oncologist, hematologist. I've taken care of breast cancer patients most of my career. I've been treating cancer for almost 20 years now. And so my three passions, I was just telling Ricky and Dr. Mo, is breast cancer, oncology, clinical trials, and disparities. And so I've had a career of being in private practice for about 10 years, and I went to Howard University for about 7 years, and I was their oncology division chief, and I ran their clinical trials division. And I left to go to FDA a few years ago. So I most recently was working at the FDA as a medical reviewer for oncology products in the breast cancer division and the GYN division, kind of seeing another side of clinical trials, which was so interesting. As Dr. Lillard mentioned, this is an era of some amazing drugs that are being discovered and now being used in the treatment of cancer. And so now I see breast cancer patients only at Howard in their multidisciplinary clinic, and just kind of continuing to see what we can do with getting a better accrual to breast cancer studies. And I think that I know we're going to get into the discussion on breast cancer and is there a difference, biological difference with Black women and breast cancers, but I think what Dr. Lillard's study, what he was touching upon is going to be the key and is so important, looking at the genetics of the tumor. And just like we found in Ashkenazi Jewish women, that there was a genetic mutation that was just much more common in that group of women. And so they were able to benefit from a drug because they put themselves out there to be, tested, and they were found that they have this. So, I don't presume that there's going to be another BRCA mutation within the African American community, but there may be something similar, maybe not quite as prevalent, but a target that's at a higher incidence. So So anyway, that goes with Ricky's comment on making sure that we're involved and we're being tested in these studies that not only just sequence our tumors and our DNA, but also see how the drugs affect us. So thank you for letting me be here to talk about this too.
Awesome, awesome,
So
awesome.
excited to hear from you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so excited. I want to hear about some of your FDA experience too.
Mhm.
And then we have my Sheila. I love you, Sheila.
I love you too. Hi, everyone. I'm Sheila McLeod, and thank you for inviting me here. I am I've been living with metastatic breast cancer for 10 years. My mom died of metastatic breast cancer in 2004. And like I've always said, that I didn't know, I thought she died of lung cancer because it had spread to her lungs, but I had to learn that no, it was breast cancer because it originated in breast cancer. So that's why I decided to become an advocate. And that's why I decided that I had a fourth progression in my ribs, July of 2018. And my doctor said, well, it's this new trial out and I think you should try it. And so I did. I said, it wasn't a last resort because I could have went back on a therapy that I was on before. So I just want people to know clinical trials are not always last resorts. And I went on it and I've been doing good with it since July of 2018. So I said that if I'm gonna talk about it, I wanna also talk the talk and walk the walk. And I wanna be an example for other Black women to say, hey, well, this clinical trial is working for Sheila, let me try it, or let me, like you said, the mistrust in the medical, because I trust my doctor. Um, a great deal. And I know, we've been having a relationship for, it'll be 11 years next month. So I'm just glad to be here and just glad to give share my opinion on clinical trials and what I've learned.
That's incredible.
Yeah, you know what? Hey, Sheila, when you first were approached about your clinical trial, were you afraid? Like what sort of got you over the fear of it?
Because I had that great relationship with my doctor, and I knew then that she wouldn't suggest anything that she thought was bad, or because the first thing she said was, Sheila, I got an 80-year-old woman on it and you're 50 and you can do good on it. And I was like, if an 80-year-old woman can do it, I can do it. So my husband and them, they didn't want me to get on it because they called it experimental drug and are you being a guinea pig? And and those things crossed my mind. It's like, well, what are you gonna do with my tissue? And what are you gonna do with this? And so finally, at the 2-year point, I asked, I was like, well, can I see a report of how I'm doing? Or, and then signing that consent form, it was like 21 pages. I'm like, well, you might need to make this a little bit easier, because you're not going to be in the office reading 21 pages. You're going to have to take it home and then with all the tests, the PET scans, and like had treatment on Monday and I was there for 11 hours. And that's because of the clinical trial. So it's like, how can we make that easier? What if I was a single parent or working, or, I wouldn't be able to do that, to sit there in the hospital for 11 hours. So we kind of need to make them easier, make the protocols easier for, and like you always say, 70% of Black women are single parents. So we need to somehow,
Help them.
do something different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Horton, why are the trials the way they are, I guess, and how can we simplify them, I suppose, is the question. And it's a very broad one because it really depends on the trial, but what goes into the design of a clinical trial for breast cancer? Let's start there.
Okay, well, like you said, sometimes it's a little different depending on the drug, but you're right. There is kind of a formula that's been used for years and years and years in terms of certain requirements that nowadays it's a pharmaceutical company who is usually submitting the information and the clinical trial information for a new drug, and most of it's based on safety. Needing to make sure that, the patients are at a certain level of healthiness, so that the data that comes out from the clinical trial is hopefully a result of the drug and not something else that's going on in their body. I think that there is a focus now on trying to be less strict, but continue to be safe in terms of requirements for clinical trials to try to overcome some of the barriers for recruiting people. Some of the requirements, not having diabetes or, not having a heart disease. Well, we all know, especially with cancer, which tends to occur at an older age, that most people have some kind of what we call comorbidities or other health issues. So there was a push at FDA when I was there to try to change the eligibility criteria so that it more reflected the practicalities of a person who is just may not be 100% healthy, but still wanted to participate. So there's the movement to be more inclusive, to make it easier to get on the study. When it comes to what Sheila was mentioning, which was so important especially in practice, especially practicing at Howard, where most of my patients were from the city, a lot of them were single mothers, and for me to mention a trial where there tend to be a little bit more rigorous follow-up standards, meaning you need to come in more often, you need to get checked a little bit more often, which is a good thing for the patient, but it may not be a good thing when you're living your life, when you have to go do something. And so there has been more of a push for the companies to start providing some help for the patients. Things like transportation assistance, we've been even trying to look at things like health, like child care, when they come in. I mean, you have to really get creative and look at your circumstance. One of the things that we know is that pharma has money. And so when I was at FDA, one of the things that tied our hands in terms of pushing accrual for minority groups is that we couldn't as an entity force pharma to enroll a certain percentage of patients, of minority patients. What we could use is our power of persuasion, saying that, the FDA would prefer, especially in diseases that have a higher incidence of African Americans, like multiple myeloma and prostate cancer, that you enroll more patients. We look at it preferably. And so honestly, just crafting that language and making it into an actual guidance has been one of the things that FDA has done. Even after I left, when I was there, we started a disparities working group just to focus on increasing the accrual. And there's a young woman still there, Lola, who has actually gotten through language into the draft guidance that just focuses on the importance of the accrual of African Americans in these studies. Pharma does not have a lot of incentive because, I'm not saying that everything is done for money, but there is not, when they want to try to enroll patients on their studies, they're just trying to find places where they can actually fill their study criteria so that they can have data. And honestly, when I was at FDA, I saw a lot of companies going outside of the US, and they're going to Europe to enroll. I saw some studies that didn't have any Black people on them. They went to Asia and Japan. And so we have to be advocates here and continue to push for increased enrollment. And whatever is going on with social injustice right now and the spotlight on disparities has been amazing. I mean, there has been this kind of call to arms where companies are seeking out places like I'm sure Morehouse, Dr. Lillard, you all have gotten people knocking on your door. I know Howard has. So I think that this hopefully is going to result in some higher numbers in terms of accrual.
That's really encouraging to hear, because I think we were all afraid that it was so much performative sort of rhetoric, putting banners on the websites about how Black Lives Matter, et cetera. And even as far as, things like taking the inclusion pledge, but taking that pledge then to the next step of what that
Action.
Exactly. What is the action? So it is encouraging to hear that you all are being approached with hopefully resources, but hopefully also seats at the table for trial design and other things, so that we can begin to address some of these barriers before these trials exist, so that we can build into, we want to bake it into the cake, what the solutions are to some of these barriers, rather than to have to figure it out and do an addendum at the end that says, oh, and by the way, we can make a concession there. Maybe there are things that we can do to address these in trial design even.
Right.
Dr.
Can
Lilly?
can I ask a question? So just for the non-medical people in the room, I'm always like, talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. Okay. So I just want you to explain the word accrual. I mean, I'm sure it means participation, but recruiting, but help people understand what that word means. It's a kind of a big word for us.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I try to be
I
over.
know you're good. No, you're great, but I'm just trying to help. I mean, just to help, get it. I probably most people do, but I think would help.
So by accrual, I just mean that recruiting people
Yeah.
to come participate on clinical trials, just
Great.
enrolling them, getting them.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, just to make people understand. Good. So Mo, do you want to talk about our big question?
I can, and I can also give a little bit of context. So
Okay.
over the weekend, we participated in some discussions for newly diagnosed breast cancer patients. And there was a huge question and I guess a discussion point about the term Black breast cancer. And the question that came out of the conversation was, what is Black breast cancer? What is it, one, to the patient? What is it, two, to the clinician? And three, to the researcher? And so, and I think that we all concluded from the call that we might not have enough information to say what it is. The patient can certainly say what the experience is being Black with breast cancer, but do you think that there is some basis, some merit, or a worthy investigation into understanding Black breast cancer better and differently? Let's start there.
Oh, yeah. Maybe I'll take a first shot at that. I think that the answer is yes, absolutely. There are big differences. You point to some of the differences in mortality, and that's for a reason, whether it's for social determinant reasons or biology. And I think it's both. In fact, there's African American women are twice as a twofold higher incidence of triple negative breast cancer. Okay, that statistically, there's no other reason. There's something behind it. There is a Black breast cancer. It's real.
Thank you for that. I needed you to say that. I'm so happy because I really believe that.
So there's biology, there's science behind it. We can think of a number of things that may have served our ancestors, given them some evolutionary advantage. One of the best, whether it's the insulin growth factor receptor changes that may make an individual grow faster, right, under scarce conditions. But if the cancer expresses that same receptor, it's going to grow faster as well. So there are differences in given our geographic or global ancestry differences that affected our ancestors and affect us today. One of the better studied one is by an African American female scientist she's a scientific director of the International Center for Breast Cancer Subtypes, I believe in Columbia University, Melissa Davis. She found that there's a common mutation in people of African ancestry, particularly West Africa, where malaria is endemic. It's a Duffy null allele mutation. So this Duffy antigen, okay, when you lack that receptor, that protein, then malaria, the parasites that cause malaria, called Plasmodium, they can't enter the red blood cell. They can't enter cells. Okay. However, it just so happens that if you do have it, it serves as a sink for growth factors, so the cancer cell can't grow. So so lo and behold, this is something that gave, lacking that receptor gave our ancestors an advantage against malaria and dying from it. However, lacking it now, when you live above the age of 40, right? Now you've got something that's going to help the cancer cell grow faster. So that's just one example of how African ancestry, or with people that came from malaria endemic region would be affected by cancer. And there are many others probably.
And was that in cell lines or was that in?
No, this is, I think Melissa looked it over, 10,000 cases. So it's highly.
It's real. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Melissa was on the show a few weeks ago
Oh, great.
talking about that. Yeah, talking about her research was pretty amazing, but
Yeah, so
invasive.
And Dr. Horton, what are your thoughts? Is there enough? I'm going to use a big word here, and I'm going to break it down for you in a second, Ricky. But
Thank you.
Is there enough sameness in Black women, in the genetic composition or the genetic makeup of Black women or their cancers to say that there are some unique cellular or genetic attributes to Black breast cancer? Do we think that we are enough alike to be able to make some determinations?
So, okay, I'm going to hesitate. I think that there is a sameness in the sense that there may be, just like Dr. Lillard said, based on years and generations of genetic changes that were passed on, there may be some mutations that occur in African American women more often. And I think that if that mutation was there, and you may find it more often in African American women, doesn't mean it's not going to be in a white woman. It
Right.
just might not be there as often. And that white person would benefit if there was a therapy for it, just as a Black woman would. So I don't believe we'll be treating all Black women differently than other races, but I do think that we need to focus on the group of African American women and the data that we get from those tumors to identify if there is a change that's seen more often in our group. So, that can be a jumping off point. Just like personalized medicine is just bringing it down to a level, it's going to be so individual. It's going to be what your tumor has, the change that's going to dictate the best treatments for you. But as a group, right, if there's something that's more often happening, a change or a mutation more often seen in our group, then making sure that everybody is tested for that would be important.
I think this conversation is really important because, sometimes we can naturalize and minimize the effects of social injustice on our illness, right? And so it's easy to say, well, we need to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We need to lose weight. We need to exercise more. Maybe if we breastfed, if we did the preventable risk factors, we then would see parity or sameness in the death rate, And I think that there's a lot more to it than that. And the word epigenetics comes to mind as well, because it's not all the stuff you were born with. When people think genetics, they think heredity, the things mom and dad gave you, right? So now we're talking about what are the changes in your tumor's genes? What are the changes in your body that made your cellular environment more fertile for cancers to grow? And I think that there's a whole lot of room for discovery there,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Environmental effects that could have occurred from the way you you made your food. Again, this is something that could have happened years back, environmental effects that became a part of the DNA. But you're right. I mean, even as far back as I remember my last year in fellowship, which was 1999, dating myself. I wrote and I was given a training grant, and my thesis was biological differences between breast cancers in Black and Caucasian women.
Wow.
And it was interesting because back then, even my mentor, who was a white male, but he supported me, kind of felt that there was not a difference if all other things were controlled for and the same. And looking at going back and looking at clinical trials where, you know, you're able to, that were done in the past that had African-American women and white women, and clinical trials are kind of a leveler because most people are screened and you're supposed to have the same type of kind of your access to care and your health. And they found that it came very close to being equal in terms of how well people did with the same treatment. So I think that there was some push because there was also that time when there was this kind of anti-race medicine. You know, people did not want, and I agree, I don't think you should treat people based on their race. And so there was movement away from trying to say that there's something about your race that makes your disease different. But when you looked at those studies, the things that Dr. Lillard said, you can't deny that within African-American breast cancer, diagnoses are at a younger age. More aggressive tumors are diagnosed in African-American women. When women, African-American women are diagnosed, it tends to be at a more advanced stage. The cancer has grown further. And, you know, some of that, a lot of that cannot be explained by, I didn't get to the doctor, or, you know, I don't have insurance. You know, the fact that you are diagnosed at age 35 has nothing to do with getting to the doctor.
Got it.
Right. And we're dying. So I think that even whatever data we have, you know, I feel like we just don't have enough data about our bodies.
But I have
because
to.
we don't, you know, we just don't have it. I mean, I don't, you know, it's frustrating to me because I feel like we have so much science still to do and so much work to do. And we need more Sheilas in the world that are willing to, you know, to take the risk and step out there. Sheila, how many Black women are in your trial? Do you know?
Actually, I entered on phase 1 and phase 2, and I was the only Black. So I think it's 6, and it's actually out of Asia.
Really?
And the FDA approved it in December of last year. They fast tracked it. So it's now a drug that women are using.
Wonderful.
Yeah. What is the drug? What is it?
It's in HER2,
Okay.
but I'm still on the trial portion.
But still, there's no Black women in your trial. I mean, you know, you're it. So even though it's working for you, we don't know that it can work for all Black women, right? It's working, you know, because we just don't have the science. So we just have so much work to do.
Sheila shows is also something that I think we need to focus on too, that Black women respond just as well to these therapies and live long lives if they get the right therapy than any other woman. So I don't want, and I always said that to my patients, even my patients, if they were diagnosed with triple negative, I said, you know what? I know it's a scary word, but you are just as likely, if you have a stage 1 triple negative breast cancer, you have a very good chance of living a long life without ever dealing with cancer. It's just a matter of getting it treated. Triple negative is aggressive. If you let it go, it's going to grow longer, faster than some of the other type of breast cancers. But the response to treatment, if you're a Black woman, it can be just as good as anybody's. It's just, you know, doing what Sheila did, jump in and get treated.
I love that. I also brought up the point on this panel. I said, there's still so much I think we don't know. I mean, when you just the ways in which we even do certain assays. And for example, there was a huge to-do a couple years ago. I think 2017, it came to the news, but back in 2016, the ways that we measured vitamin D deficiency, right? And so, Dr. Little, you're nodding your head because this is a key example, right, of how the assay itself, the test itself, the actual, the lab test itself was not registering. Actually, we are deficient. Many of us are deficient in a protein that the test measures for, right? And so there are these differences that occur. You want to speak about that a little bit? Because you're nodding your head like, yeah, this is.
Well, yeah, I know just a little bit. The, you know, even the levels, self-reported levels, what was perceived to be low levels, quote unquote, were designed for European Americans and not people of African ancestry that often have, we're not as much, people don't work outside as much as we used to, and or living in different climates that's not with sunlight, for example. But then also, we even have differences in our vitamin D receptor and how we metabolize vitamin D are very different for whatever reason. I'm not sure, but it also affects, certainly it's been well documented to affect prostate cancer in particular. But it's all similar studies of showing the same things in breast cancer as well. You know, Sheila mentioned something that sparked me. It was interesting how this company from China has a drug in the U.S. and I reflect back to one of the first precision medicine therapies, genfitinib, that is designed to bind a EGFR receptor mutation that occurs in a different cancer, lung cancer. But it actually failed in the United States, because not enough of the patients had the mutation the drug was designed to inhibit. But when they studied the same drug in Asia, in contrast, 65% of the patients had that mutation, and it was overwhelming success, and that's how it made it to market. So hopefully studies like the one we're engaged in will identify new, unique drug targets for African Americans to take advantage of things like that.
Great. So how can we fix this? I mean, Sheila, you're like my poster child for clinical trials, and I sort of had a new idea about how to, we're trying to figure out how can we get more of you? How can we talk to more Black women, and what are the words we need to say to help people sort of get over this fear, get over the mistrust? And so my latest idea was do it for your daughter. And, we as Black women, we don't really do anything for ourselves. We do everything for our kids, for our families. We put the cape on every morning and fly out the door to say, okay, who do I have to fix today? Right. I'll pay my kids' rent before I pay my mortgage. I'll give you my last piece of chicken. So right, as a mother. So, and I always say, I do this work for Belle and Leia, for my grandbabies. I don't want them to talk about breast cancer, right? So to me, maybe if we say to a Black woman, do it for your daughter, do it for your grandkids, do it for your, do it for your mom, do it for your family. And maybe that's motivation, since we don't do a lot of stuff for ourselves, but do this work, and, and you may save yourself in the meantime, but you may save them in the future. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think first we need our doctors to understand Black women, period, and to not see us coming to, just reading an article, and the article said that why are we always like having to prove ourselves when we go to doctors and different things like that. But we need to have, our doctors need to continue to have an open conversation, because a lot of women don't even know about clinical trials. Like I had never realized, okay, a clinical trial, well, what's that, So I had to read up on it and learn about it, for myself. And I've always said, you be your own advocate and you find out, those things yourself. Like right now, I am on a FDA task force that we're changing the language in informed consents, because you got these big words. Well, how am I supposed to understand that? So now we're making them to where, like you said, that a patient can actually understand it. And my point is, why don't you make it into an app where you give me this 21 page, I could take it home, I can read it off the app, or even for older patients, maybe, you have to give them paper, but making things just easier for clinical trials. Like this week, I have to go next week to get my eyes checked. And you get this great standard of care, when you're on a clinical trial. But it just seems like somehow we need to make it easier, and we need to get over the mistrust and the Henrietta Lacks and the Tuskegee Airmen, and listen to doctors like Dr. Moe and Dr. Lillard and Dr. Horton that promoting clinical trials. I heard a lot of women go, oh, I went to a Black oncologist and it was like the best visit ever. But it should be like that for all oncologists. And a doctor, to me, that should be the first thing that they talk to you about is clinical trials when you're getting a breast cancer diagnosis. So it's just continue to have those open conversations and educating yourself about them and educating yourself about a lot of Black women don't even know what type of breast cancer they had. I still to this day don't know what type of breast cancer my mom had because I never knew the subtypes. I never knew all this information until I was diagnosed 5 years later. So it's just a lot of things that I had to learn. I'm like, wow, was I living like in the, I was just like, I didn't know. I thought you walked the walk and I was done. Okay, I did my fair share for breast cancer, but it was just so much more. And then when I got it, I was just like, man, they told me I'm gonna be dead in 5 years. I said, I gotta do something, So
Sheila, that resonates with me because I remember, watching my grandmother be, my mom died when I was young. I was 7, and then my grandmother took care of us, and she got breast cancer when I was 11, and then again I was 16, and I watched her get bilateral breast cancer, and at that time she didn't talk a lot about it. They kind of hid it from us. They didn't really share with us what was going on. And I didn't know anything about it. I knew I wanted to be a doctor. And I didn't really find out what her subtype was until many, many years later. I was cleaning out the house and I came across these old medical records. And I said, how could I not know this? How could I not, where was this information when I was younger? And so I totally understand that because you're on one side of the coin as a family member watching your loved one, and on the other side, either as a patient or as a doctor, caring for patients. And it could easily be me. And being ill-informed is something that just takes you by surprise. But there's so much that I think patients don't know to share about their breast cancer journey. And so I think one of the reasons we do this show is to try to encourage people to share their stories, to talk to your family members, to get informed. And I would love to see something like this for doctors, to begin to have those conversations, because that has always been the missing link. The eyes can't see what the mind doesn't know, right? If the doctor doesn't know about the trial, the doctor's not going to offer the trial. And if they don't talk to Black patients and understand what's important, they're not going to talk to Black patients and say what's important, So we got to do a better job of educating our physicians and having, patients like you and having, the Rickies come and talk to the docs and the students.
How do we, well, 2 questions I have. One of them is, I often get the fear, like I'm going to get the placebo drug. So people don't really understand what standard of care is, and that frankly, you do get better care. You do get your eyes checked. You do get, watched over very closely. So can you explain that a little bit, I think, to our audience? I think also, is there something that we can do to help people know even when to ask for a trial? Do you're sick, right? I'm sick. I've got cancer. I've just been told I got cancer. I've just been told I'm metastatic. So how do I even have the wherewithal as a patient to know to ask for a trial? Sheila's just telling us that she didn't know what to ask for. She didn't know, like her doctor approached her. Had her doctor not approached her and explained it to her, she wouldn't have known. So how can we kind of empower patients to say, hold on a minute, is that the best thing for me? Is this the best drug for me? Because we don't know. I remember my doctor saying, do you want to do this or this? I'm like, you're the doctor. I don't know what to do. I've got cancer, fix it. Like, that's your job. So, and we want to be part of the conversation, but we need help. Like, how do we know what to do and when to ask and how to ask and, what's the best thing for us?
Dr. Horton, I'm gonna let you jump in here because surgeons aren't the best at these conversations either. Like, all right, I'm gonna do surgery on you, and I see you in the operating room, and they hang the doorknob. So it's a whole different beast talking about educating surgeons and having that conversation. But tell us more.
Okay, I think my sound went out. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good. I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So right, asking that question, as you were saying, Ricky, like who should ask? I say everybody. If you're unfortunate enough to get a diagnosis of cancer, that question should be asked of your oncologist, because unfortunately, not all oncologists are going to present the potential clinical trial for the patient. And sometimes it's because it's an oncologist who is not near a place that has clinical trials, or maybe it's a smaller practice, but it should always be at least addressed. Not everyone needs a clinical trial. There are a lot of areas of cancer where we've got good therapies. There's always room for something better. But I always say, just ask the question as a patient, do you think that I'm appropriate for a clinical trial? You know, the other thing that we did when I was at Howard, we had a grant to talk to primary care physicians. And so we went around to ground rounds in all the local hospitals and doctors' offices and gave a talk on how about cancer clinical trials. And if you're a primary care doc and you find out your patient was diagnosed with cancer, we'd actually have a paper with the words to say, you know, make sure you ask your doctor if you are someone who would benefit from a clinical trial. So I think there's so many levels that we can attack in terms of educating people about cancer clinical trials in general. But most people tend to, like you said, have a close relationship, hopefully a good relationship with their primary care doc, and kind of hearing that from them might give them more confidence to go into the, you know, this oncologist they've never met at their first meeting and say, you know, what about clinical trials?
And from the FDA perspective, is there some magic pill or drug that's out there that the government just doesn't want us to know? I have to ask that question because you know we hear it and you know people say it. So we might as well just go ahead and
Put it out there.
Okay, well, not that, honestly, there was nothing but push to get these drugs out there. I mean, in the time that I was there, they started shortening the time. I remember in general, it's just always been, it takes about 8 to 10 months for a drug to get approved by the time they submit their paperwork to the FDA. And as a reviewer, what I do, sort through all their data and make sure my numbers matched up with their numbers and there wasn't any red flag that something was wrong. But it was about 8 to 10 months for that process to take place. Well, with these new targeted therapies and how good they looked in terms of being better, I think the first drug that I approved in maybe 2016, we got it out in 16 weeks. And that was what, you know, the guy who's the director of OHOP, Rick Padzer, he's like, we're going to do this right, but we're all going to learn how to get these drugs out quicker. And they gave us the support, and the statisticians and everybody was just moving. It was to get, I think, nivolumab out for renal cell cancer. So all of that to say, my experience working at the FDA is that if it was the opposite, if there was a drug, especially a drug that looked like already it was going to be really beneficial, there was everything done, not only from the time that the paperwork came in. Now, when you talk about fast tracking and breakthrough therapy, that just means that earlier on in the studies, there's evidence that this might be a really promising drug. And the drug company sees it, and the FDA, they talk to the FDA even in phase 2, FDA will say, okay, you're right, this looks great, it's meeting our criteria, we're going to work with you, we're going to meet with you more often, we're going to work to try to get this drug to phase 3 and approval as fast as possible.
I didn't want to bring up COVID, but isn't that sort of what's going on with COVID? Right. COVID
Yeah.
trials, right?
It's a it's you have to hope and believe that the institutions are exactly the way they were, you know, under all administrations, in terms of, you know, doing the best to keep safety and efficacy as the mantra for getting the drugs approved, you know, not rushing it out just to have it out, but making sure that it's safe and it's going to work.
It's going to work. Good, good, good.
Right.
So you know, we have a partner that we work with, and James, you work with us on it too, called Citizen. It's Citizen with 2 I's, and they are a great resource for getting information on trials, but also they're really, one of the main things they do is consolidate your medical records into a digital file. So I've actually helped a couple of breasties try to get into trials, and it's a nightmare. One of my bestie breasties, She actually goes to Yale Medical Center, and we were trying to get her into a trial at Sloan Kettering. She's a PhD in market research. And it took the two of us a month to get her data together in the form that they needed from Yale Medical Center, and actually with a lot of help from it was with Dr. Tiffany Traina's office and her assistant. You know, I've sent a lot of people there for triple negative, and she helped us. But it took 3 brains and people to get the data together for her that she needed in the form that they needed it to do the trial. And then she got rejected. It was so frustrating, the whole process. So the one thing that Citizen does that's really great is they, you know, it's free to the patient. It's totally HIPAA protected. And you go and you put your data in, you literally give them your driver's license so they can get the information from your doctors. And you have this amazing digital file. And I use mine all the time at my eye doctor's office. All my lab work is in there. And it really just consolidates all your information. So literally you can push a button and the trial people have access to it. And then they now have a matching service that they're focused now on triple negative breast cancer and metastatic breast cancer. And so they basically are taking all of the data from clinicaltrials.gov, which is very difficult to manipulate, and putting it into their system so they can match your data to a possible trial for you. And so, and it's totally controlled by me, the patient. So they, you know, if their algorithm finds a match for me, they'll say, "Hey, Ricky, we found a match for you. We found these 3 trials that your profile looks good for. Do you want to engage?" And then I, as a patient, can say, "Yes, please release my data. It's okay." So I'm in total control of my data, but it's such a great service because I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to think about where the PET scan was. I don't have to think about, and I had records from Atlanta, from Maryland when I moved here. And so my stuff was all over the place. And by the time you get the bone scan and the PET scan and the MRI and the blood work and the whatever scan, to have it all in one place is a great thing. And a lot of us, you know, I guess we have my charts and different kinds of, you know, a lot of doctors' offices have different things, but this just consolidates everything. And it's an awesome tool. So I would have everybody check it out. It's and we'll put the information in the comments. But right now, they're actually really trying hard to recruit women into trials for breast cancer, and they're working with a bunch of pharma companies to give trials. So they actually are doing they're kind of celebrating this new clinical trial matching thing. So they're giving us giving patients $100 for enrolling in their trial program. So whether you need a trial or not, if you just want to consolidate your data, if you give them, you know, sign up for Citizen, they'll give you $100. And then they'll also give you another $100 to donate to the charity of your choice. So they're going to do that for everyone, kind of our listeners of the show, for the next 24 hours. So till tomorrow, if you want to sign up for their service, it's a great way to consolidate your data, even if you don't need one right now, even if you don't have, you know, if you don't need one, but it basically
Time actually, you know,
gives
while
you
you're
access.
everything,
Right,
time
right.
to collect your records so that, you know, you'll have them in one place. I think people move around and it's so important. Can I interject and ask a question of Dr. Lillard? I want to ask you, let's say a record number of Black women who are watching this program go and sign up for Citizen, and they are connected with clinical trials. How do we motivate them to consider that trial? What's the next step, I think, once we get people engaged, to actually get them to take that step into saying, you know what, yes, I'm going to participate. Where's the missing link there? What can we do?
Sorry, I think we've mentioned it. We discussed some of that today, to this evening. And you know, it's important to participate. You know, it's not just, it may not just benefit you or may not benefit you, but it will certainly benefit other cancer patients and have more survivors.
And maybe your kids, and maybe your kids and your
Exactly.
grandkids.
That's what I was going to get to. You know, not only yourself, but your sister, your daughters, your cousins. You know, understanding more about it will help your family, and that's also what we tend to communicate with participants in our study. You know, in our study in particular, it's really important. You know, we try to empower the patient with some of this more of the education you alluded to, and the medical report that they have after participating in a study like ours, and none of the other ones. So those are all things that resonate with our patients.
And when you sign up for Citizen, you can enroll in your program, right? Your Morehouse Medical School,
Oh,
Total
absolutely.
Cancer Care. Yeah. So that's,
Absolutely. You know, so the tricky part about this, what we're doing, you would think that the genetic sequencing is a tough part, but actually trying to cobble together all of the medical record data and how a patient feels after a therapy. We're trying to make sense out of all of that and tie it back to some uh, molecular phenotype of the cancer. Okay, and then determine, okay, what were the adverse events, if any, how fast did the patient respond. So we can glean a lot of that from medical records. But a program like Citizen helps automate that process and makes it a lot faster, much more efficient. So it's good for the patient, and it's good for more rapidly identifying a study that the patient could benefit from.
there are a lot of big words in that sentence.
Oh,
They don't have to actively have cancer though, right? They can be finished their treatment and you can go
Yeah.
back.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like
that's
I have a file. Yes.
bad. Is that suppose you already had cancer and what trials are there that are non-drug trials, and we call them real world data trials,
Yep.
or aromatase inhibitors or some other aspect of a trial that we might do that doesn't necessarily involve you, getting chemotherapy, for example.
Right. Like I'm in, Dr. Lillard's trial, and I'm no, NED right now, no existence of disease. And I encourage, every breastie who's had breast cancer, whether you're a survivor, thriver, warrior, to participate and consolidate your data at a minimum. And, I hate to say this, but, here I go again with the Black breast cancer stats. Black women, have a 39% chance of recurrence. 39 is a big number, and I mean, God forbid, I don't want anyone to get it again, and I don't want to get it again, but I want to be prepared when I do, and it's like that first time you get it, Sheila, right? We don't know anything. So it's like, we're not going to be caught in the dark again, right? When we get it again. So I'm going to try to know as much as I can and position myself, not only for myself, but for my daughters and for my other breasties. So I can be knowledgeable about what the opportunities are to get better,
Right.
to get the drugs I need.
I think these are statistics they should give you. Like when I first was diagnosed, you get this huge bag of just all of this information. They make you watch this video, and one of the videos should be on clinical trials, not because you need it, but just for the information. And I also think that once you're off of the clinical trial, you should get someone that's been on a clinical trial so they can walk you, a patient advocate, so they can walk you through the process of like what entails in the clinical trial, and this is what it means when on your consent form and different things like that. You should be matched up. It's just what Dr. Litter said, just empowering a patient from the beginning of their diagnosis, having these statistics and having them understand, early on what a clinical trial is, because, we're still trying to process one, that we got breast cancer, but we also have these other options out there that are for us. And I say too, why not get them while they're in medical school?
Yeah.
Have patients come in and say, this is our story. This is how we were treated. And this is how we would like to be treated. And, you know, um, you know, uh, with clinical trials or with anything, just get to know me first before you even not know that I don't understand what a clinical trial is.
Right.
All I understand it from is, the mistrust in the medical system, but no, you to me. And I think students in medical school would benefit from us telling them our stories.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In my medical school, we do a patient spotlight. I would love to have you come and talk to my students sometime. And I know that at Howard and also at Morehouse, I'm sure you guys have these, the clinical encounters where the patients can really come in and talk about these things, because it is something that student doctors need to hear. They need to understand how this impacts the care, how this impacts lives, why it's more important than just, you know, a paper or an accolade on your CV to get into your residency programs, you know, and really get them interested and excited about research. Because I feel like the way medical education is starting to go, there's so much emphasis on getting into your residency programs and getting into your specialties that the research aspect of things comes a lot later, and it needs to happen, and that interest needs to be cultivated a lot sooner, especially for Black and brown researchers. You know, those pipelines are already so weak and tenuous that we need to strengthen them, you know, at our institutions.
Yeah, because we're going to work on the breasties. I'm going to work on the breasties. Sheila's going to work on the breasties. We're going to have them ready for you doctors, because, you know, because we, you know, we have to get our own act together so we can fight for ourselves, you know, but we need you, and we need the, you know, the medical community to embrace us and help and educate us. But we're going to have our army working, aren't we, Sheila, to get our breasties ready for this, because we do have to stand up for ourselves. And sometimes we have to fire you guys. Sorry, we love you, but you know, and I think we have to know when something's not right for us, and do what we got to do, right, to save ourselves. So we appreciate you.
Wow. Any final closing thoughts on how we can continue this conversation? Like, what would you want people to do who are watching moving forward? We got family members watching, we have survivors watching, we have maybe newly diagnosed caregivers, church members, anybody who's watching. Sheila, what can they do? What should they be doing and thinking as Breast Cancer Action Month draws to a close?
My mother would say, never go to the doctor alone. And she would say, you know, record the conversation, so when you get back home, you can listen to it and understand it. And just, you know, if you have any questions, or you don't, you know, my doctor, when I first met her, she said, if my bedside manner is ever bad, I want you to let me know. And we just had a great 11-year relationship, because, you know, sometimes I'll be like, well, that's a little big word, like Ricky was saying. Now you need to break that down a little, like HER2 positive. What does HER2 positive mean? Like, I don't know what that means. And it fed off my estrogen. I had to get my ovaries removed and everything. But, and right now I'm trying to start a survivorship program at my hospital, because they don't have one. So just find out the thing, you know, everybody don't have to be an advocate, you know, because we're all getting through this diagnosis the best way we can. And any treatment that failed me, I don't regret it. It sounded right at the time. So don't be hard on yourself, because the treatment is not going to, you know, it might not work, and it might work. But at the time, that was the options that you had. So just don't be hard on yourself. Just, you know, just, I always say, wake up and live. And that's all we can do with metastatic breast cancer, or any kind of breast cancer. So
I love that.
She's a rock star. She's my rock star.
you all are.
No, I think, you know, it's, you know, I think you are a testament to how to live with metastatic breast cancer. And I so respect you, and, you know, you motivate me to fight, because I'm not sick. So I have to fight for you every day, and I will, you know, I will fight like a girl, but, you know, we have a lot of work to do. We really have to get, you know, our breasties educated, and our doctors educated, so we can correct this nut of Black breast cancer, which there is a real Black breast cancer. So.
So you don't know what you don't know. So
Right. We don't know. And we need more research. We need more data. We need more information.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more about our study, just email us at Total Cancer Care, all one word, at MSM, Morehouse School of Medicine, .edu. And
Say that again.
Total Cancer Care at MSM.edu, and we'll get you enrolled in the study, along with that medical report we talked about, and even connect you with the folks at Citizen to help.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome. Dr. Horton, closing thoughts for you, and how can people reach you for more information, or to follow you on any social media platforms, or to come see you?
Okay, well, I'll tell you, I think that one of the things that I would say to people about information, there are so many sites and blogs and people who are writing about their experience. But if you're diagnosed and you just want some basic information that you can understand. There's cancer.gov, which is NCI site, which I think is great. And there's cancer.net, two really easy sites to remember. Cancer.net is ASCO's site for patients. And you just search whatever you need. The other thing I would say is, I just wish people would talk about cancer. I know at our family reunion, that's my job. I would stand up and find out who had cancer. Like, I'm the cancer person. You don't want to be that person, but you want to be that person because you need to know your family history, as we're talking about the importance of genetics is going to play in this. But to reach me, I'm through Howard University's Cancer Center, calling them. I just kind of do their oncology breast cancer clinic sometimes. I can give Ricky my email. My email is really simple. It's oncdoc36@aol.com. And so I have people just, if there's questions or you need something answered about cancer and there's nobody who you could reach out to, feel free.
Great. And we'll put that in the notes too.
So very much. And we want to thank our sponsors, Ricky.
Yeah, we want to thank Immunomedics today. They really want to help us get into trials. And we work with them. They actually are helping us with our HBCU intern program. And they've been a great partner in helping us, talk to more Black women and try to get people in. And, they have a drug called Trodelvy, and it's doing a lot of good work in triple negative breast cancer. So we appreciate their work. And also Amgen, of course, right?
We want to thank Citizen. We want to thank our guests today, because this is such an important topic, and really we can talk about it every time and never talk about the same thing twice.
Right.
And so we hope to have you back and share more information with us as the trial and the data comes out. Dr. Liller, come give us updates for sure. And Dr. Horton, if there are trials that you are conducting, you're the investigator for even, we talk about things like cold cap therapy and just the differences in how Black women respond to certain things.
Right.
Neuropathy trial that we're advertising for right now. There's so many things and ways that we can get involved to just learn how we respond to therapies and what can work for us, and to sort of get our feet wet with clinical trials and get exposed to it. So we are so thankful. Sheila, I love you. It's so good to see you.
So thank you.
People don't know all the stuff that you do.
Oh my gosh, she's all over the place.
She is connecting folks on the continent of Africa with resources here and trying to help breast cancer not be a death sentence there, and trying to educate folks. And health literacy is your mission and your ministry, and you are just doing the darn thing, girl. So
What I promised God I would do, so
wow.
don't break promises to him.
Good. Yeah, she just founded, tell me about Too Many really quickly.
I went over to Africa in October of last year, and we helped them start like support groups, and like Dr. Mo was saying, just telling them that for them, stage 0 is a death sentence, like cancer. And for breast cancer, what was it, 80-90%, they find it at stage 4 in Africa. So we're trying to make them more aware and trying to give them webinars about triple negative and metastatic breast cancer. I have 30 breast prostheses that I'm going to send over there, because prostheses over there are like $300.
Wow.
And it's very expensive to get. So you see most women that have had vasectomies go flat. So we're trying to get those over there. So just trying to do work over there just to let them know that we're thinking of them and they're not alone. So we're trying to start a nonprofit for them. Even just so much as the lipodemia sleeves, getting that over there, and getting them support groups, palliative care and things like that over there. So
great. So how can people reach you?
I'm on Facebook, Sheila Marie McGlown. I'm on Twitter. I love Twitter.
You love Twitter. I know you.
I love it. Swag. You ask one question, you get about 1,000 answers.
Right.
Sheila, and IG, A Survivor's Lens.
Thank you guys. Love you guys so much.
I'm Dr. Monique Gary on all social media, Ricky at touchbbca.org. And this is The Doctor Is In. We hope it's been relatable, reliable, and real. And we look forward to seeing you Saturday for the Halloween walk. Right?
Halloween walk. Yeah, join our Halloween walk. If you go to our website, touchbbca.org, it'll come up right on the front page. We're gonna walk. We're gonna dance. We're gonna do a thriller dance contest. We're gonna do bone health and we're gonna have a great time for Halloween. We're gonna dress up your dog. Bring your dog. We're gonna give a costume. We have some great prizes for the dogs. Great prizes for the dogs, and maybe a few cool prizes for the grown-ups too. So check out Citizen, check out our walk, and we'll keep rocking. The doctor is in.
See you
Thank
next
you.
month. Doctor's in.
Bye,
Take
everyone.
Bye, everyone. Breasty love. Breasty love. Bye.
care.